advisors who are aware of this are typically appreciative of like, okay, and now I'm not responsible for knowing everything all the time, implementing it all myself, setting boundaries for my life partner. Like now someone else has to do all of that and I can just sit back, relax, and enjoy my life. That sounds great. Let's do it.
What's up, Model FAs? David DeSell here. And before we dive into today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at YCharts. Numbers and data are one thing, but how you communicate and scale the delivery of these insights to clients is the real challenge. And the reality is, people are more inclined to invest their attention and hard-earned dollars when presented with a captivating story and a skilled storyteller. YCharts empowers you, the advisor, by offering fully customizable tools for reports and proposal generation, allowing you to expertly guide and control the narrative during client meetings. With an all-in-one solution like fundamental charts, stock and fund screeners, scenario capabilities, and more, YCharts equips you with the essential tools to showcase the strengths of your investment strategies and illustrate the value that you bring to your clients. Click the link in the show notes to start your free YCharts trial and get 15% off your initial subscription for new customers only. Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSell here, president of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And we are joined here today by Brooklyn Brock. And I think especially with this episode and with Brooklyn, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this one. Reason being is Brooklyn works specifically with financial advisor as their advisor. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening to this that do their own planning, but would highly encourage you to get a third party in there to help you, just in case there's any biases, of course, with you in your own plan. But Brooklyn is a third generation financial advisor and founder of Ellevate Advisors LLC, which is a fee-only RIA. And as mentioned, she specializes in financial planning and exit coaching for advisors themselves. Brooklyn and I both have our SEPA designation, Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and we're going to talk about that today as well. And throughout her career, she found that advisors rarely do retirement planning for themselves like they do for their clients. And I can attest to that. When I was an advisor, I was the quote unquote landscaper who cut their lawn last. And admittedly, I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening to this that maybe could do a better job in your own planning. And that's where Brooklyn jumps in. So that said, part of the reason why she works with advisors is having that understanding that a lot of advisors don't do their own planning like they do for other folks, drove her to launch her own RIA to serve advisors exclusively. Brooklyn travels across the nation as a speaker, sharing her passion for helping advisors themselves. So without further ado, Brooklyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David. That's quite the introduction. I hope I live up to it.
Of course. So help me understand. I mean, I get the general premise, like, doctors should have their own doctors, right? But where did this idea come from? Where was it birthed? And why is it that you chose to focus specifically on working with financial advisors?
Yeah, I love that analogy of doctors needing their own doctors because it really gets into the psychology of like how we as financial planners operate. If you are trained as a doctor, you could probably, if you get a cut, do your own stitches, hypothetically. But if you need brain surgery, you're not going to be doing that on yourself. And similar analogy that a lot of people say is therapists need their own therapist because there's a lot of internal work that we can't do on ourselves because we're not objective. And I think that's the intersection of financial planning for advisors is when you're going through a transition, like let's say retiring from your own firm, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into the deal and retirement projections for yourself that it can be good to have another set of eyes, similar to that brain surgery scenario. But also there's a lot of deep work. And if you're married, that, including your spouse, uh, in that work can be really helpful. And this all came from watching my granddad. I'm a third generation CFP. He struggled to retire from his own business. So he stayed on until his late 70s, early 80s, and he said he was going to retire every year. He would come up with excuses like, "Well, I don't know how much I need to retire. Do I even have enough money? I don't know." So my dad and uncle would get someone from the back office to do a plan for him. And yes, you have enough money. There was always something else that made him not feel ready or excited to pull the trigger. And there is something about retiring to something or retiring with something to give you meaning and purpose in your second half. I think a lot of advisors are afraid of that, of not having that, and then of going downhill mentally or physically very quickly just because you don't have something engaging in your life that's worth living for. So that's essentially what happened to my granddad. Within a few years after retiring, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It could be just because he was already in his 80s, but you'll never know, right? I don't want that to be me when I'm getting retirement age. I want the profession to be healthier. I want to be happy when I look at making a big change like that. I don't want to be afraid. And I don't think advisors don't deserve to feel that way. They do this for clients for a living. We deserve to have good feelings about our own life and retirement. So that's what inspired it all. And now we work with our own financial planner, and our life is already so much better. But I could go on and on about the benefits of financial planning.
So I have a bunch of questions. One is SEPA related. So for those of you listening, if you're not familiar with the SEPA designation, it stands for Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and it's put on by the Exit Planning Institute. Some people utilize the designation to help advisors in value acceleration and ultimately coming up with an exit strategy. Other folks, be it advisors, CPAs, attorneys will get designated so that they can help general business owners, with that same process. And one of the components early on in a, call it SEPA engagement with someone, is helping that person determine what life after being a business owner looks like, and helping develop that purpose. And I forget the exact stat, but I want to say it's something, it's either like 30% or 70%. One of those is sticking out to me, of business owners, not necessarily just financial advisors, but business owners in general, regret exiting the business afterwards. And part of that is due in large part to not having that plan for, your second act, so to speak.
Mhm.
So my question is, Brooklyn, what does that process of discovery and planning look like when you're working with an advisor to understand their passions and their purpose and the things they want to do once they're no longer running the business, and how do you help them with that?
That's such a deep question. I love it. There are so many different components that make up holistic financial planning, holistic exit planning. And we, with the SEPA training, split it into three: personal, financial, and business. We talk about those in terms of success and readiness. So, in terms of readiness, we start a financial planning engagement and a succession coaching engagement. Really, any engagement should start with assessing someone's values. What does success look like to you? Maybe you don't have a picture of that yet, but what does it feel like to be retired and to be loving life? And how does that align with your values as a person? Do you know what your values are as a person? A lot of the financial plan and the succession plan are derived from crafting a plan that fits who you are as a person, the business that you've built, and how do we help you transition from that into the person that you're going to become and the life that we're building for you. And that's that's really important. I feel like that is the foundation of the coaching process. We do that through a number of things. With the financial planning, we call it values-based financial planning. There's some life planning exercises and components that most of us have at least heard of. George Kinder has done great work with his life planning training and exercises and questions. Um, every new client that does a financial plan with me, we start with a values gift, and they get to pick from a list of different values-based exercises, be it a book or a workbook or a deck of cards. It's like figure out who you are, kind of an exercise. And with the succession coaching, it looks more like we go through a number of different things. We start with an assessment of where you're at, and there's a lot of the values that come through those conversations turn into criteria on a decision-making matrix, where we're looking at, okay, based on your values and the succession options available, this one is going to be the best fit. And it allows us to quantify some of the intangible things that help us make the best decision about what's going to make us happy and be the right fit for our clients and ourselves. So that was a lot of different answers to your question. Did I answer what you need to answer?
Yeah, so let's kind of speak through sort of a real life scenario. So let's say me personally, I'm on the verge of retirement. Um, Fast forward a couple life stages, say that I have kids and grandkids, because I don't have that yet. So let's just make that up for a second. As of right now, the things that I enjoy doing, I enjoy traveling, I enjoy working out, anything kind of fitness oriented is fun. I enjoy also doing things that help other people, be it mentoring or consulting or what have you. But also, when I do retire, I don't necessarily, it doesn't excite me to think about just stopping and not doing anything productive, meaning the way I envision my retirement is still consulting in some way, shape, or form, but truly, truly, truly doing it because I absolutely love doing it, not because I need to make money. And the idea of sitting my butt on the beach and drinking a Corona every single day, that sounds nauseating to me. So in that sort of scenario, how would you help me discover what I do on the first day after retirement, what I do on the second day after retirement, so on and so forth? Because I don't really have a set in stone vision as to what my daily life looks like, but I'm so regimented that if that goes away, you know, that would be detrimental to my well-being. So how do you help someone like me in that scenario, somewhat hypothetical, somewhat reality, that scenario through that thought process and coming up with a plan?
That's an excellent scenario because that's what most advisors say when they reach out to me. So what I picked up on from what you said are a few things that you love in life: travel, physical health and fitness, and meaningful work, potentially mentorship, consulting, something of that nature. Did I capture what you
Correct.
expressed?
Yep.
Okay. So, from a holistic perspective, components of what does your week in retirement look like are going to come from, okay, what does travel mean to you? Is that one big international trip per year? Is it going to a national park once a month? Is it visiting family on the big holidays? Or is it some combination of those? Because that will be slotted into your ideal week in retirement exercise, which sounds cliche, but we do eventually get to that after talking through things like, okay, your travel plan, and then we talk about what does a wellness plan look like for you. My granddad loves to go to the gym and play racquetball with his friends, and he's 84. I don't think I could play racquetball at my fitness level right now, but that is like that shapes his fitness plan. There are probably some other things from an objective perspective that could fit into his fitness plan, like stretching and physical therapy to make sure that he can keep playing racquetball to the level that he enjoys. But he also likes to play golf. And so then you start to see these different elements of health and fitness, those slot into your ideal week. So, and, and I do say this with a grain of salt because my dad is in his 50s and he sold his advisory firm and has retired because he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And he's doing much better now that he's on medication. But like 50% of his time and his week in retirement calendar is comprised of physical therapy exercises, going to the doctor, adjusting his medication, um, and cycling. A big thing that helps people with Parkinson's. So we all enter these life transitions with different things that we have to watch and be aware of. So the health and wellness plan for some people may include like a mental and spiritual wellness, like doing yoga classes and stuff like that. It could include like a treatment plan for something like an osteoporosis or Parkinson's. So whatever it is, that actually does take up more time than we allow for it if we are also working. I don't spend as much time prioritizing going to the doctor. I actually have osteopenia and I should be making sure that I'm on the right supplements. And that's an oversight on my part that I have not been to the doctor to have a checkup and see if the vitamins that I've been taking are working and moved out of osteopenia. That's like weak bones. And it's very strange for someone my age to have that. But I should be taking better care of myself. Like I think I'm on the right regimen, but I need to check in every few years. I don't make time to do that. I have to work. I have clients who need me. But there should be enough time in the schedule to take care of yourself from a physical fitness perspective, whatever that means to you, as well as do meaningful work because you don't have everything riding on your shoulders of making income to provide for your family and managing a team of people who are looking to you for answers. So you can make yourself more of a priority now. So now we get to the exciting part of, well, what does that meaningful work look like to you? And for every advisor, it's different. I have some people tell me, I am very excited to set up a consulting business and work with clients. I have this model that I've built out that makes my firm unique and helps us serve clients better in these ways. And I'm really excited to share that with more advisors and help them figure it out instead of having to reinvent the wheel. That's an option. There's also my granddad kept his CFP designation after he retired so that he could consult in the business that he sold to my dad and uncle. They actually gifted it, but like sold for $1 kind of a thing. But he was able to stay on and consult for a number of years. But that really depends on the kind of succession plan that you choose. And so they were open to letting my granddad stay on and consult for a few years. Not every buyer is going to be okay with that. So these are some of the things that shape the succession plan, but also give you an idea of like, okay, a week in retirement, if you will, or whatever the next chapter is, looks like this. And you can start to like feel it and experience it. It becomes more tangible. And if it's something that is working for you, it's going to make you excited to start that, and it's going to be fun.
And you suggest that, as I mentioned before, I'm very regimented, and I have when I'm gonna eat, when I'm gonna wake up, when I'm gonna shower, like in my calendar, right? And you presumably have less things to do, less commitments that you need to abide by, so to speak, in retirement. But if I just all of a sudden stopped keeping a calendar, I'd probably go bananas. Do you suggest that folks you still utilize a calendar in retirement, so they have that structure?
It really depends on the person. I also am one to appreciate an excellently segmented and color coded calendar. But I have a lot of clients who are um, maybe from a mature generation who are anti-technology to a certain degree. So it's really whatever works best for you. Maybe it's a planner on your desktop and you kind of have a note I say desktop, meaning like the top of your desk, not your computer desktop.
Hmm.
You could do this with a paper calendar of like print out and color in with colored pencils what your ideal week looks like. And when you can slot in, okay, this day is the day for my doctor's appointments, my haircuts, my dentist visits. This is the day when I'm going to babysit my grandkids. Fridays are for business consulting. I have these people that I'm working with, kind of a thing. So you can do themed days, you can do themed half days. You can get as fancy with it as you'd like. But I think that doing that helps you create that vivid vision of what life looks like. It makes it more real. I think a lot of us, uh, when we think about retirement, we're like, oh, someday I'll retire, not today. And that's how we feel for most of our lives. And then it's like, it's time. But doing this exercise helps you process it and get from like, oh, someday I'll retire to being like, okay, I'm actually ready. Because that doesn't happen overnight. You have to have time to process it and like transition mentally and emotionally into that new schedule.
Now, I'm being very, very assumptive here. But I picture like, let's say there's a carpenter, right? And the carpenter doesn't have time to, work on his own home, so he hires a carpenter. And the person who uh, hired this other company or this other person, may think, well, why are you doing it like that? Or this should be done like this. And they can kind of be overbearing because they're also an expert in that field, presumably. So my question is, do you ever find that there's some resistance or overbearingness when you make suggestions to advisors on what they do every day with their clients? Or do you find, and if so, how do you work through that? Or do you find that if advisors are self-aware enough to hire someone else, they actually give up the reins? Help me understand that dynamic.
Hmm. It is a difficult dynamic. A lot of advisors uh, will never be okay with asking for help or getting vulnerable. And they are probably not ones who would ever even call on me or think to use me or our services as a resource. So there's probably a lot of advisors out there uh, who would just never think of that. Similar to how there are people who are comfortable going to see a marriage counselor or a therapist, and there are those who are not. Whatever it is, you know, culture, the way we were raised, like the underlying beliefs, like there's just things sometimes that keep us from um, even realizing that these options are out there to help us, or even recognizing when we have a problem. There's a certain amount of that underlying it. But for people who do reach out, we have occasionally had that problem. And that is why we have developed some client engagement standards, which are how we work with clients and what clients can expect when they work with us. And one of the things that's on there, especially in regard to financial planning, is that we are actually an advisor with a CFP and not a paraplanner. This is going to deliver best results, especially if it's for an advisor and their life partner, if the advisor kind of backs off the gas and lets the advisor take the lead so that both spouses are represented in the relationship. But also, it's amazing from my personal experience how much I can learn if I just stop talking and let someone else take the lead, because we are all experts in different ways. I found that I have learned a lot from working with our financial advisor. They are things that I didn't know. I didn't experience. My brain doesn't work that way. We use different software. It leads us in a different direction than I could have ever done on our own. But it's better because me and my husband are both in the conversation. We have our space. We um, and we both love it because of that reason. So some of my advisors struggle with that more than others, but we know when we're starting this financial planning engagement that that's going to be the goal of what the relationship looks like. If someone's not okay with that, they don't have to move forward. Maybe there's a different solution out there, because financial planning is one type of service that can help people through life transitions. There are other services like therapy, counseling, life coaching. There are lots of different things. So if this makes advisors feel uncomfortable, maybe one of those other options would be more comfortable. It likely won't touch on all of the things that need to be covered to do a holistic transition plan, including finances and what would happen to your finances if one of the people in the couple passed away. But maybe it's a place to and then come back and do financial planning when you feel ready. So this is something that we talk about
Advisors
on the
who
prospective
are
client
calls.
aware of this are typically appreciative of like, okay, and now I'm not responsible for knowing everything all the time, implementing it all myself, setting boundaries for my life partner. Like now someone else has to do all of that. And I can just like sit back, relax, and enjoy my life. Like that sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's a big value add. And I picture, you know, I just imagine a scenario where an advisor, walks into the office or pops on Zoom and is like, "So here's the plan I'm thinking about, Brooklyn. What are your thoughts?" And you probably, run into those scenarios every so often. But if they can, and I don't say this in a negative way, but if they can set their ego aside and surrender to the process, I would imagine it provides, a lot of peace of mind to them, as you just alluded to. And my next question is within the context of a financial plan. Um, if I'm an advisor and I'm working with you, not necessarily for exiting purposes, but just for planning purposes, and I'd like to consider acquiring another firm, or maybe I'm an employee style advisor and I want to buy in to my firm. How does that conversation go? Like, where does that person start? How do you help folks through that process? Because there is a lot of consolidation happening in the industry, and there's a lot of firms who are allowing their employees to buy in, and that's something that you need to prepare for in a proper way. So, how do you help folks walk through that scenario?
I want to answer that question by telling an anonymized story
Cool.
of a client that came to me a few years ago, and they said, "We're both making great money at our employers. We love our jobs." The advisor spouse was offered the opportunity to buy in to the advisory firm, um, and they don't know how to analyze this compared to other investments that they could be making. They don't have kids. So it's like we could invest in anything. How do we know that this is the right fit for us? And so we talked a little bit about what are your values as a company, or not a company, a couple.
Hmm.
What are your values as individuals, as a couple? How does this offer, because it was a structured offer, buy in this percent, this is the value, kind of a thing. How does that make each of you feel? How would you pay for it? What are the different options of how we could structure the payments from the assets that you have available? How does this change your relationship with your employer? We talked about all of these things and more. Like we spent 6 months on this. We updated the financial plan. We put in some scenarios about how this could look. We looked at their other financial goals, and their life goals. They want to buy their dream home. They have a house. The mortgage is reasonable, but it's not like where they see themselves living long term. And they're also kind of far away from family. They're also interested in the non-advisor spouse wants to start a business. So there are these other components of if we get tied into making those payments, we're giving up freedom, options. There's just a lot of unknowns about this commitment and what that means you're going to say no to later. So after having that conversation, we kind of concluded among the three of us that it may be better if instead of just saying no to the offer, if we proposed restructuring the offer to make the value a little bit more achievable for them, that they wouldn't have to say no to their other goals if those opportunities came up. And so we said, okay, instead of this chunk of percentage of the business, what if we said, okay, you could buy in at a smaller percentage, and there was also a structure on how that could be sold back over time so they could get out of it if things went sideways or something. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, but there wasn't a plan for that. Um, and that was one of the things that was causing some fear and anxiety. So we actually scheduled a meeting with the partners of the company, and we said it, and I think the advisor spouse led the conversation. I was there, the non-advisor spouse was there, but we essentially ended up proposing more of a, not a structured like ESOP type of compensation plan, but at least a document where it's outlined um, how many shares can be bought at a time, and giving employees options where, like, you could buy maybe one share at a time, you may be able to buy 5 shares at a time, but being more flexible than just the one offer that she was given. And then also providing a plan on how those could be purchased back by the company to give employees more flexibility. And as the company was growing, they intended to offer equity to future employees. So this wouldn't just benefit her; it would benefit the company long term, incentivize the employees. It was actually a really excellent idea. It solved everyone's problems, and so they went back to coach that they were working with to talk through how they were going to structure that. And about a year later, um, things did change. Things did go sideways, and the advisor spouse ended up moving on. So it's impossible to know how what's going to happen in life, but talking through and making sure that you have a better plan, not just the available plan, feeling like you have someone who can help you advocate for yourself and negotiate transactions, especially when we have no experience at the beginning of our careers. Like, she had never received an equity offer before. So, like, helping navigate that, that was priceless for them. They did find some other investment opportunities and ended up moving forward with that, and it provided a greater return in that time period since she received that offer than she would have gotten had she bought in at the company. So that ended up working out better for everyone, even though it wasn't like the moving forward to yes, like we had hoped. Um, but I think it very easily could lead to that when you're going through this process together where everyone feels like they can share, and you're creating like an equity purchase plan that works better for everyone. I mean, only good can come from that. So,
I think my main takeaways from that story would be when you're exploring that option and the firm says, okay, cool, here's how you do it. It's not black and white, and you have the opportunity to manufacture a deal, so that you don't have to feel as if you have to say yes or no to that particular offer.
mhm.
Unless it's maybe like a larger firm that does this all the time and it's like, hey, this is how we do this. But I think
Right.
more often than not, um, the firms and the owners are nimble enough to right size something for that particular person. So you can restructure the, call it, entry point. But what I also took away with what you shared is it's important before that entry point to have an exit plan as well in the event that it makes sense to break up. Because I can imagine that if you don't have that and that document to reference back to, it can be very messy and contentious and drug out for a while as opposed to a clean break. So that was a takeaway. And then also not assuming that just because it's a business that you know and it's a business that you're a part of, that it's the best use of your dollars. If you have other goals and aspirations, elsewhere, your dollar may be better served in that direction as opposed to the platform that you're a part of. So that was helpful to go through. So thank you.
Yeah. It's definitely going through this experience and having these conversations highlights what kind of a company you're really buying into, how people
Mm,
respond to like a counter offer, if you will, or any feedback, or including people in the process, or like saying, no, you're not allowed to hire your own financial planner to help you analyze this. Like that actually happened to another advisor in the same situation, received an equity offer and reached out to me and said, I would like to hire you to do my financial plan because I'm not comfortable with how we're going to pay for this. And the firm came back and said, no, by no means are you allowed to share any information about what you do, how much you make with anyone. And I told him, there's a certain right of confidentiality with businesses, but I wouldn't feel comfortable working for a company that wouldn't allow me to retain my own counsel and make sure I'm making a wise decision. So I don't know how that story ended, but it does say a lot about the company that you're working for, how they take this kind of a negotiation and transaction with you if they respect you.
Yeah, and I mean that's easily solved with an NDA, but maybe there.
Hmm.
I
Which is
compare
included in our agreement, by the
right,
way.
and I compare that something totally different but similar in this scenario is, let's say you're going to buy a used car, and in the description and with the salesperson, they're like, it's clean, it's nice, it's running tip top shape, this and that. And then you approach and say, well, I'd like a private, third party inspection of the vehicle. And then they say, oh, well, and they kind of dance around that. It's like, okay, immediately untrustworthy and run the other way, not just to a different vehicle, but to a different dealership altogether, because they're not trustworthy people. And in that instance, I'd like to believe that that's not the case, but that's the way they made it appear
Hmm.
by approaching the scenario that way. So, the due diligence process when you're making an investment is imperative. And if they're blocking you from doing that and getting help elsewhere, um, that's a major red flag. So I'm glad they
Hmm.
didn't move forward with that. Um, Brooklyn, I do want to pivot. So this has been incredibly helpful, and the general takeaway is, if you're a landscaper, don't cut your grass yourself, because it will probably be overgrown, because you're so busy, doing other things and helping other people with their lawns. So get your own advisor, be it Brooklyn or someone else. And I think there's also value in, or something to be said about not working with an advisor at your same firm, because it's so close and personal, and you got dirty laundry, so to speak. So having just a totally unbiased, unaffiliated person, I think is imperative. But I do want to pivot. So one of the things, if this is your first time listening to an episode, one of the things that we do with all of our guests is ask them a book that's had an impact on them. It's our way of helping distill a reading list for all of you. And the book, Brooklyn, that you chose is Couples That Work: How Dual Career Couples Can Thrive in Love and Work, by, and I may butcher this, Jennifer Petriglieri. Um, and I haven't heard of that book. Oftentimes I do hear the books when the guests bring it up, so we're able to riff back and forth. But I'm going to sit back and listen and learn. Why is it that book has had an impact on
I love this book so much. I've read
you?
so many like industry books and business books, and this one has legitimately changed my life because I went through the exercise that she talks about in the book, which I'll explain in a minute. But the premise of the book is that couples go through three major transitions in life, dual career couples especially. And how do we increase happiness with our careers and our personal life, make sure we're making the right decisions at each of these transition stages? So, and I'm going to butcher this part. I think the three transition stages, I'm in the first one, right? So you get married and you're like, wow, what does life together look like? The second stage is you've relocated and bought a new home, or you have your first baby, and you're like, okay, how do we figure this out? How do we make this work? We cannot do everything like we thought we could do in the first stage. We have to start saying no to things and prioritizing. How do we do that as a couple and stay happy again with our marriage and our work? And then the third stage is often someone who's been in the career for 20, 30 years. So maybe they're in their 40s and 50s. They're not ready to retire, but it either they wake up one morning and it doesn't provide the same sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. And they may feel the need to completely change industries or give up this high paying job to go into business for yourself, because that's a lot more rewarding and fulfilling to you now in a way that it wasn't when you're figuring out how to become an expert in the field. So navigating that, and often it's at the same stage as becoming empty nesters. And so you're figuring out, who are we as a couple now that we're alone? So those are the three stages. And at the beginning of the book, she describes an exercise called the dual career couples contract, where you outline as a couple together your values, your boundaries, and your fears. And Aaron and I, my husband, went through this exercise because we are a dual career couple and I want to maintain my career even though we do plan to start a family. And we needed this as a foundation to help us have more open conversations and know what the factors are to help us avoid bad decisions, but also know what is the right decision at the time when you're confronted with multiple options. So this was at first a conversation, but now we're able to start applying it to situations. And we're adding to it and making it more rich as we experience more things in life. And it's like, oh, we should add that to the contract, and we update it occasionally. But that is something we brought to our most recent meeting with our advisor. For the first time, we had a family intergenerational financial planning meeting. And we brought this to that meeting and we said, this is the kind of life that we're wanting to build. Um, and let's talk about how we can do this. How do the grandparents fit in to the picture, and things like that. And that was a fun exercise coupled with a fun conversation, because we know what we want and we're clear and we can make better decisions and have better conversations now. So I'm hoping, as I go through the next stages of life, uh, that it will be just as helpful for us. But I've also recommended to several of my clients, and they've started to do their own contracts because they have these big decisions they're trying to make, especially the younger couples. And it is just as life changing for them as it was for me. So that's in like the first 100 or so pages of the book. So even if you buy it and read it and just get that, you don't have to finish the whole book if you're not in those life stages. But just that exercise was so valuable for me. I was like, I must share it with everyone.
Well, and even if you do, read ahead, even if you're not that life stage, you're leveraging someone else's hindsight for your foresight. So I would encourage folks to finish the book. And I actually, you may have seen me glancing over, but I have 2 copies for my fiance and I that will be here tomorrow. So I'll let you know how we like it and what we do with it. But you sold me, so
Excellent.
you just cost me $40, Brooklyn.
Well, I listened to the audio version and I quite liked that. The narrator has a unique accent because for the book, she interviewed all of these couples from around the world and different backgrounds and from different countries. And that's how she came up with this exercise, through this research study. So getting to hear her like pronounce all of the different names and do it in her voice, that was really cool. I hope you got the audio version.
I got the hardcover because we both every night we read 10 pages just to like settle down. So we'll be on either side of the couch reading together. So, but I'll let you know how it goes. So if advisors are listening to this and they say, you know, I think there's something there. I think I should, get my own help and guidance, from a third party. Where can we find you?
Yeah, great question. www.ellevateadvisors.com. That's Ellevate with 2 L's. And we have a description of all of our services on the website, an outline of pricing and all that. But you can also follow us on social media if you just want to keep dating. We're most active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Haven't made the intro to Twitter yet. That may be coming, but yeah, I'd love
Staying
to.
away from the fin twit.
Well, no, we are on Twitter. I meant TikTok. Sorry. Yes,
Oh, okay,
we're
okay.
on Twitter. But I'm on TikTok, but more as like I listen, but I don't make videos yet. So yeah,
Uh,
follow us
you're
pretty much anywhere except TikTok.
you're lurking on TikTok.
Yeah, it's fun. Those videos are great.
Well, I'm glad that you are on Twitter, and I joke, but they call it the FinTwit
Hmm.
community, but I mean that's your target market, right
Yeah.
there. So you'd be silly not to be on there. So I'm glad that you are. But for everyone who stuck around for this episode, I hope this opens up your eyes a little bit in terms of the value of having your own advisor. I appreciate your time and attention as always in Brooklyn. Thank you for yours as well.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Hopefully, I'll get to see you again soon.
Yes, have a great day.